If you were to close your eyes and picture the single greatest predator to ever walk the earth, chances are you are picturing the Tyrannosaurus Rex. It is the pop culture icon of power, the ultimate killing machine. But there is a painful, almost embarrassing truth about the king that history often overlooks. The T-Rex was a prisoner. While it ruled its ecosystem, it was secretly suffering under a brutal law of physics, a law that other dinosaurs living right next to it had somehow managed to break. Let's look at the numbers, because they paint a devastating picture. According to our most rigorous biomechanical models and fossil evidence, the T-Rex hit a hard theoretical ceiling at roughly 15 tons. To us, 15 tons sounds like a monster. But in the context of the Cretaceous period, that number is surprisingly small. Just look at its neighbors. The Argentinosaurus, slow, lumbering plantitor was walking around with a body mass of up to 120 tons. Think about that disparity for a second. The prey was allowed to grow nearly 10 times heavier than the predator. Why? Why did nature allow the sauropods to inflate to such absurd godlike proportions, defying all logic? While the ultimate apex predator was mechanically capped at just a fraction of that size. This isn't just a random quirk of biology. This is the result of the most violent mechanical battle that evolution has ever fought on dry land. And the T-Rex, for all its power, simply couldn't win it. To understand why the king was dethroned by physics, we have to look at the architecture of its body. The Tyrannosaurus Rex was a theropod. It was bipedal. It walked on 2 legs. This design is fantastic for agility and speed, but structurally it is a nightmare for scaling up. You see, gravity treats 2-legged animals very harshly. As you increase the size of an animal, its mass increases by the cube, but the strength of its bones only increases by the square. This brings us to the 15-ton wall, the largest T-Rex fossils we have ever found. Like the famous Scotty, tip the scales at just under 10 tons. Our best biomechanical models suggest that the theoretical maximum for a bipedal carnivore is roughly 15 tons. This number isn't a choice, it is a structural mandate. If a T-Rex tried to cross that 15-ton threshold, it wouldn't become a super predator. It would become a biological failure. Think of it like the lobster paradox. There is a biological fact that lobsters technically don't age like we do. They don't get weaker just because of time. However, big lobsters still die. Why? Because they eventually become too large for their own good. As a lobster grows, its shell becomes heavier, thicker, and more difficult to shed. Eventually, the metabolic energy required to push its massive body out of its old shell becomes greater than the energy the animal possesses. It dies of exhaustion, crushed by the requirements of its own growth. The T-Rex faced a similar mechanical executioner. Being a predator is not just about being big. It is about being active. You need to chase, you need to pivot, and you need to withstand the shock of impact. If a T-Rex grew to 20 or 30 tons, its legs would need to become so thick to support that weight that they would lose all function. It would effectively become a statue. At that size, the simple act of taking a running step would generate enough impact force to shatter its own tibia. So, the T-Rex didn't stop at 15 tons because it ran out of ambition. It stopped because gravity gave it an ultimatum. You can be a giant, or you can be a hunter, but you cannot be both. On land, mobility is a tax that you have to pay, and for the T-Rex, 15 tons was the absolute limit of its budget. To go any heavier would be to surrender its crown, while the T-Rex was struggling to balance its structural budget. A different group of dinosaurs decided to simply ignore the rules of economics altogether. Enter the sauropods. If the T-Rex was a fighter jet, these things were aircraft carriers. Let's look at the Argentinosaurus. This animal didn't just break the 15-ton limit, it shattered it. Estimates place this titan at a staggering 70 to 80 tons. And if you want to get into the truly controversial territory of paleontology, look at the Brachiosaurus. While the remains are fragmentary, some calculations suggest this beast could have reached 110 to 170 tons, stretching over 45 meters long. These numbers are so large they almost feel fake. These creatures were walking mockeries of the physics that constrained the T-Rex. They weren't just animals anymore. They were mobile, plant processing factories built to challenge gravity itself. So how did they cheat the system? Why didn't their bones shatter like the T-Rexes would have? The answer lies in engineering. Unlike the agile bipedal T-Rex, the sauropods were a Tyrannosaurus. They were quadrupedal. They distributed that immense mass across 4 pillar-like legs, effectively turning themselves into living suspension bridges. They didn't need to be fast. They didn't need to turn on a dime. They just needed to stand there and exist. By sacrificing speed and agility, they bought themselves the right to be massive. But even the mighty Argentinosaurus was still fighting a war against gravity. Every step it took was a calculated risk. However, if you look away from the land and towards the deep blue, you find a place where that war doesn't exist. This brings us to the ultimate loophole of physics: buoyancy. In the ocean, gravity is effectively canceled out. The water supports the weight of the animal, meaning the skeleton doesn't have to do all the work. This is the cheat code that allows marine giants to thrive. It explains why a creature like the Mosasaurus or the ancient whale Prehistoric colossus could grow to 60 or 70 tons without worrying about their legs snapping. In the water, you don't need pillars to hold you up. The medium itself holds you. This distinction sets up a fascinating biological rule. Argentinosaurus represents the absolute hard limit of what is possible on solid ground. It pushed terrestrial biology to the very breaking point. But in the ocean, the limit doesn't exist. The moment you step off the shore, the ceiling for size vanishes, and evolution is allowed to go completely wild. And as we are about to see in the Cretaceous oceans, wild is an understatement. If the land was a struggle against gravity, the Cretaceous ocean was a free-for-all war zone. This wasn't the calm, deep blue sea we know today. This was a shallow, warm, super-productive battleground of monsters. Because the water removed the structural limits of weight, predators here didn't just grow large. They grew into engines of pure destruction. At the top of this underwater food chain sat the Mosasaurus hoffmanni. This wasn't just a marine reptile. It was the ultimate realization of what happens when you take the brakes off evolution. Growing over 17 meters long and weighing anywhere between 15 and 45 tons, the mosasaur didn't have to worry about its legs breaking or its spine collapsing under its own weight. Gravity wasn't its problem anymore. So it took all that biological energy that land animals waste on standing up and poured it directly into one thing: violence. Its bite force was hellish, designed not just to kill, but to crush the armored shells of giant prey. It stands as the terrifying proof that when gravity disappears, evolution allows you to become the lizard with the deadliest jaws in history. But in an ocean filled with monsters like Mosasaurus, everything else had to scale up just to survive. Look at Argentinosaurus. This wasn't a turtle in the way we think of cutesy turtles today. This was a tank the size of a minivan. At over 13 feet long and wider than most cars, Argentinosaurus is the largest turtle to ever exist. Why did it get so big? It wasn't just because the food was plentiful. It was an adaptation of necessity. In the Cretaceous ocean, small meant dead. To avoid being crunched by a mosasaur, Argentinosaurus had to become a monster in its own right, and the madness didn't stop at the water's surface. It extended into the sky. If we look up, we find the Quetzalcoatlus northropy. This pterosaur defies everything we thought we knew about flight dynamics. With a wingspan of 11 meters comparable to a Cessna airplane, it is the largest flying animal of all time. But unlike the marine giants who floated, the Quetzalcoatlus still had to fight gravity, and the battle was brutal. To get that massive, giraffe-sized body into the air, it couldn't just flap its wings like a bird. It had to perform a violent, four-limbed vault, using its massive knuckles to pole vault itself off the ground with explosive power. It serves as the final piece of evidence in this era of giants. Whether swimming, walking, or flying, the Cretaceous period was pushing biology to the absolute, jagged edge of what physics would allow. But for all the evolutionary genius of the T-Rex, the Argentinosaurus, and the Mosasaurus, they all shared one fatal flaw: They assumed the world would stay the same forever. And 66 million years ago, the universe decided to prove them wrong. This is the moment physics stepped in and said, "I don't care how big you are." When that asteroid or rock the size of a city slammed into the Yucatan Peninsula, it didn't just cause an explosion. It hit the reset button on the entire planet. The initial impact was devastating, sure, but that's not what killed the giants. What killed them was the aftermath. The impact threw gigatons of dust, soot, and aerosols into the atmosphere, choking the sky and blocking out the sun for years. This triggered a catastrophic collapse of photosynthesis. And this is where the size trap snapped shut. On land, the plants died first. The massive Argentinosaurus, with its 80-ton body requiring thousands of pounds of food every day, simply starved to death. With the herbivores gone, the Tyrannosaurus rex was left ruling a kingdom of skeletons. Being a warm-blooded active hunter requires an immense amount of caloric energy. The very metabolism that made the T-Rex a super predator became its death sentence. It couldn't hibernate. It couldn't wait it out. It just burned out in the ocean. The story was equally grim. The darkness killed the phytoplankton. That killed the zooplankton, which killed the ammonites, the primary food source for the marine reptiles. The mighty Mosasaurus, the emperor of the ocean, found itself swimming in a dead sea. Its massive size, once its greatest asset for domination, became a liability. It required too much fuel in a world that had run out of gas. So who survived the apocalypse? Not the strongest, not the biggest. The survivors were the ones we ignored. The tiny, rattle-like mammals and the small ancestors of modern birds near Aniths. Why them? Because they were small enough to hide in burrows, escaping the heat and the fire. They were scavengers, able to survive on rotting matter, seeds, or insects. They didn't need 100 pounds of meat a day. They needed an ounce. The K-Pg Extinction teaches us the most brutal lesson of paleontology. When the ecosystem is stable, size is power. But when the system collapses, size is suicide. The era of the giants didn't end with a fight. It ended with starvation. The winners weren't the kings of the Cretaceous. They were the ones who knew how to endure the dark. So, looking back at the fossil record, we see two clear rules written in bone. Rule number 1. On land, gravity is the ultimate lawmaker. It arrested the T-Rex at 15 tons and told it, "You can go no further." Rule number 2. In the ocean, the laws are rewritten. Buoyancy is the loophole that allowed the impossible to happen, letting life balloon into leviathans of 100 tons or more. But here's the beautiful thing. The asteroid didn't stop the ambition of life. It only paused it. The legacy of gigantism survived the fire. Even after the dinosaurs fell, nature went right back to the drawing board. We saw it with the Paraceratherium, a land mammal that pushed the 20-ton limit. We saw it with the Megalodon, a shark that made the great white look like a goldfish. And truthfully, we shouldn't feel nostalgic for the monsters of the past, because we are living among them right now. The blue whale isn't just a big animal, it's up to 190 tons. It is likely the heaviest creature to ever exist in the history of this planet, bigger than the Argentinosaurus, bigger than the Mosasaurus. Somewhere in the deep, the colossal squid is fighting sperm whales in a battle that rivals anything from the Cretaceous. The players have changed. The physics and the brutal arms race remains exactly the same. It makes you wonder, if another extinction event hits the reset button tomorrow, what comes next? Maybe in 50 million years, the ocean will be ruled by carnivorous 50-ton dolphins. Who knows? If you enjoyed dissecting the physics of these ancient titans and want to uncover more secrets about the monsters that time forgot, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We have some incredible deep dives into prehistory coming up that you won't want to miss. Stay curious, stay fascinated, and I'll see you in the next era.